What was the religion of the historical Jesus like? Hello, and welcome to my ex-Christian, secular, deconstructing Bible study bonanza. I'm here to help you deconstruct. We're diving into the textbook, The New Testament, by Dr. Bart D. Ehrman. I want to apologize to Dr. Ehrman because I made an error in pronouncing his name in the first few videos. My apologies. I highly suggest you follow Dr. Ehrman on social media, get this book, and follow me too, of course, as I deconstruct and share my spiritual journey. To truly understand the historical document of the New Testament and the figure of Jesus, you have to understand the context they existed in. In the previous chapter, we talked about the Greco-Roman pagan context, and in this chapter, called The Jewish World of Jesus and His Followers, we're going to talk about the context of Judaism in the early 1st century. Before we get started, I want to make it clear that any anti-Semitic comments will be reported and deleted, and also any pro-Zionist comments will be reported and deleted. There is a difference between Judaism and Zionism, which is a whole different video, and I'm not going to get into it here. I am anti-Semitism and pro-Palestine, and my platform is not the place for pro-colonization bullshit. It's important to understand ancient Judaism in order to put the New Testament into its proper historical context. As Dr. Ehrman says, Jesus and his earliest followers were not 21st century Americans with modern concerns, beliefs, worldviews, prejudices, practices, and ideology. They were ancient people with ancient assumptions about the world and their place in it. In particular, they were all 1st century Jews, so it is particularly important here at the beginning of our study of the New Testament to have a sense of what 1st century Judaism was all about. As deconstructing Christians, we need to understand that we were taught anti-Semitism within the church. The idea that Jesus was Jewish and I follow Jesus, therefore I can't be anti-Semitic, is complete and utter denial of reality and therefore bullshit. The Christianity that for centuries won the war of religion in the Western world had the explicit goal of wiping out any belief that wasn't theirs, especially Judaism. They did that by stealing a holy book that didn't belong to them, that is, stealing the Hebrew Bible or Old Testament, and fabricating a new faith in opposition to what Judaism taught. That is where modern anti-Semitism began. I did a 14-part series on this back in June and July 2023, so if you're interested in deconstructing around this, I suggest you go watch it. Yes, historians agree that Jesus was Jewish, but we can't behave like he was Jewish in a modern context. We also can't conflate Judaism and Christianity. The Christian today is not the Jew today, and vice versa. Their beliefs are totally different. Their spirituality is totally different. Their goals in relating to the world is totally different. Moving into the historical context, Judaism in the ancient Roman world can be put into the pyramid I talked about from chapter 3. Jews were seen by other people as one of multiple cults used in the historic sense of a particular type of worship to one deity and not the modern pejorative sense. Judaism was known and accepted in the world back then. Ancient Jews believed that the God they worshipped was somewhere between the unknown and unknowable God the Roman philosophers believed in and the human-like gods of Mount Olympus. Their God was so holy and far removed from humanity that no one was allowed to say his name, and still aren't. They believed that Adonai had entered into a pact with them to keep certain laws as an act of reverence toward him. In Christianity, we were taught that keeping the law was an onerous burden. We even looked with pity on the Jewish people, which is an act of anti-Semitism. Do you see how insidious the Christian teachings are? But both current and ancient Jewish people don't see keeping the law as a burden. They see it as a great honor. They were favored by Adonai, so they follow the law to show their love and appreciation of what he did for them. They don't have to follow the law to be saved. That's an anachronistic belief forced upon them. One of the things I've been doing since the aforementioned videos on Christian anti-Semitism is following Jewish bloggers. I was at first quite, astounded by the reverence toward the stories in the Hebrew Bible. In Christian Sunday school or a typical sermon, we would regard Moses or Isaac as just some guy that lived a long time ago. He did some stuff, maybe it was interesting, maybe it wasn't, but then we'd move swiftly on to the New Testament and whatever Jesus had to teach us that week. However, The reverence that I see Jewish bloggers use to speak about their patriarchs is an entire paradigm shift. These were holy men and women that were chosen by their God to live their lives and pass on the wisdom of the ancient. And as I say it, I'm like, duh. But being raised Christian with the same attitude toward Noah that I had toward George Washington made this a whole moment of enlightenment for me. Jewish people actually revere the ancient figures in the Hebrew Bible, just as they revere their duty to the law and their God. So, in the context of our study of the New Testament, we need to understand how much reverence the historical Jesus and his followers would have had toward their Jewish beliefs. It's not the combative dismissal of the words of the scripture we were taught. It's understanding them, really grokking them. In order to intelligently criticize something, you need to get it. Otherwise, you're not critiquing the thing itself, only your faulty knowledge of it. That's a bit of a tangent, but my point is that Jesus may have been critiquing his own people, but it came from a place of intimately knowing them, because he was one of them. In the next section, I'm going to talk about the history leading up to the time Jesus lived, which is crucially important in understanding what he said in the New Testament.